All right. So I wanted to come on and just talk about something that I found incredibly interesting. So if you watched my November energy update, I pulled these two cards. So they are protection and vulnerability. So I started thinking a little bit more about what this really means. And I mentioned a little bit about, protection from the outside world, looking at who you are spending your time with and maybe who no longer resonates within your sphere. And also, what might you be protecting yourself from internally, as far as what don't you want to see, acknowledge, or even feel within your own body. And then vulnerability, of course, is our ability to be who we really are, to express who we really are, including those pieces of shame, of aspects of ourselves that we want to keep hidden away because we don't think that they are appropriate enough or good enough or might not fit into a specific sphere. So what I started thinking about was the rib cage in general. So energetically, all of our meridians actually come together within this particular area. And physically, we actually have our sternum bone here where our ribs actually connect in the front of our chest. And so it in itself is protective. And our heart is actually over to more so to the left of our body. But right underneath is our thymus gland. So our thymus gland, yes, has something to do with our immune system, and from childhood to our teenage years, it is actually creating T lymphocytes, which have to do with, again, immune system and our bone marrow and things like that. However, I was doing a little bit of digging as far as metaphysical anatomy. That's something that I really like to nerd out over. And it was all about your identity. And I thought it was really interesting that the thymus is actually the most active during childhood and teenage years, when we are actually formulating who we are in the world, who we want to be. And often in teenage years, we can become extremely rebellious because we don't feel like we can be who we want to be, or we can become quite submissive as well, depending on what happened in our earlier years. So if you have the thymus gland here at the front of the chest, that's all about our identity. And we're talking about vulnerability, we're talking about protection. There is maybe a bigger question here of, do you feel safe to be who you really are? And then if you go right above that, you get into the throat, which is, do you feel safe to express who you really are? Or was your light, your identity, who you wanted to be, was that cut short? Were you overly criticized? Did you have a challenging time expressing yourself? Or were you trying desperately to explain yourself or express yourself, and you were just misunderstood? So at some point, perhaps you closed down your throat, and then you also made that agreement with yourself that it is also unsafe to be who I really am. So the deeper I started looking into this, I thought it was incredibly powerful. So do you feel safe to be who you really are? And can you also express that? And this is, I'm not talking about the side of yourself that you show to the world, that you might put on the facade of confidence, or you might put on the facade of, I'm a healer, I might put on the facade, I'm this, I am that. I'm talking about those pieces that carry our shadow emotions, that carry our wounds, the parts of ourselves that we may feel are shameful or not enough, right? So just give yourself a moment to let that land. And when he talked about the meridians merging at this point as well, that also has to do with our growth. That has to do with our ability to trust our intuition and wisdom. That has to do with how well we are aligned, the work we do in the world, how we show up. Also, how easily we can let go of the past or let go of what's working or sorry, I should say not working, or do we become attached to things that happened before that no longer allow us to move forwards, right? As well as, do we feel safe to be in community? Do we feel like we're acceptable or we're accepted, like we belong? So there's all sorts of aspects that come together here, and that threads right into our identity. Interesting. So if you are still following along, I just want to move through a meditation. So I'm going to try and keep it as quick and simple as possible. So just give yourself a moment to get comfortable if you want to follow along with this. So make sure your feet are flat on the floor. Maybe get into a nice big chair so you can actually lean back so your body isn't struggling to sit upright. And just bring your hands onto your chest. So try and spread your hands a little bit wider so your fingers more or less meet at that clavicle space. And close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. If not, keep them open. I'm going to close my eyes through this process as well. And just allow yourself to take some deep breaths. So you're filling into your chest and you might feel your chest rise up into your hands. And then letting your chest fall and just feel that pressure, that weight of your palms. So breathing into your hands, let your chest expand. And then letting everything go. So as you breathe, even feel like you could just drop into safety. You can drop some of that need to protect yourself or have those walls up. So just for that moment, see if you can come into this place of softness, of surrender. And breathe into this, especially if any anxiety comes up around safety and surrender. Just trusting that you are safe in this moment and in this process. Just begin to draw your attention deeper and deeper within yourself. And can you go back to yourself as a child? And connect to that part of you. And hopefully there was a moment within that time when there was joy, when there was laughter, when there was silliness, where it felt like you could be completely yourself. There was no judgment of what you were doing. It was all about creativity and exploration. And just see that part of yourself and see if you can invite that version of yourself in. Especially if you feel it challenging to connect to joy and play in your life. And then going a little bit further, was there a time when you felt like your voice was not valid or you were silenced for what you had to say or what you had to express, or you were no longer heard. And maybe you can picture that version of yourself. Maybe there's an age or a time frame that you remember. And can you spend time in this place? And you might need to come back to this a few times so you can allow that version of yourself to express what they need, so you can hear yourself, so you can be fully expressed. So allow whatever words and emotions come up with this. Keep your breath long and deep if you're able. And can you tell that version of yourself that wasn't seen, wasn't heard, wasn't validated? Can you invite that self in? Can you hold them and tell them that they are safe to say what they need to say? And the people that were not able to see you or hear you or understand what you had to say. Maybe they were caregivers, maybe they were peers or friends. But are you able to release them and release that need for them to see you if you are able to see you? Can you release the expectation on others to show up, see you, or understand you in a particular way? And maybe imagining those people, maybe they're still in your life, maybe not. Can you imagining them get further and further away? So maybe your boundary, your energy just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So you have more space to be yourself. Then allow yourself to ask the question, if I felt safe to be who I really am, if I felt safe to express all parts of myself, if I felt safe to be in my truth, who would I be today? How would you show up? What would you allow yourself to express? And can you call upon the light of that little inner child? And can you create a version of yourself that maybe you can give yourself that permission to be joyful? You can give yourself permission to express more fully the good and the bad. We have these ideas that we can only express particular emotions or the approved parts of ourselves. And we have to hide away the messy. Can you see a version of yourself that accepts all of you? And you can be safe, you can feel safe to be that fullest expression. And how would that feel in your body as you breathe here? And maybe as you become, if you allow yourself to move towards this version of yourself, you then bring in people into your life that are so much more aligned with who you really are, your true identity, that accept the good, the bad, the messy. We all have a past. We all have shame. We all have trauma to some degree. And we deserve to be accepted for who we are. But that all needs to start from deeper within. So in this space, can you allow yourself to drop some of that protection, that fears showing the world who you really are? And can you drop some of that protection that stops you from feeling what you need to feel within yourself? We create so many walls and barriers, both internally and externally. But can you begin to open up some of those doors? And inviting those pieces that maybe you've pushed away. But calling them in allows us to become so much more whole. So give yourself a few more breaths, taking any wisdom, taking any thoughts, feelings with you. Any realizations, and bring this forward into the moment. So take your time just beginning to open your eyes when you're ready. Maybe another moment with your palms on your chest, just reinforcing that you are here with yourself and all of you is allowed to show up in your truth, in your vulnerability. And it may also be helpful to do some journaling around this. So if you need to, going through some of your past of what your inner child needs to say. Maybe that angsty teenager, what was she trying to communicate? Or he, right? And if you brought all of that forward, that truth, those words that were never maybe fully communicated, what would that shift within you? If you felt like you could claim your identity and claim your voice, whether it's approved externally or not. What matters is that you find your identity and you find your voice and you begin to feel safe to show up in that way in the world. So this is a lot to unravel. These simple 2 cards brought this all up. So again, our identity, our voice is so important. And when you get into protection as well, that's a whole other conversation. We're just touching on it today. But hopefully this has helped. And I know this process this month might be heavy for you, but allow yourself to feel. Remember that those emotions that we deem bad are not really that at all. They all are there to show us something, to illuminate where we're at, but we are allowed to feel them all. They don't need to be shoved down. When we suppress, when we shove down, when we deny parts of ourselves, that's when we become fragmented. That's when we feel like we cannot be who we really are. So see if you can bring more of yourself. And remember that you are safe, you are worthy, you belong in this world. So thank you for tuning in.